Said you have to hold it at arm's length, right?
I think so.
Yeah, we're live.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fossil Preparation Lab at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. My name is Natalie.
And I'm Salvador.
We're both fossil preparators here in the lab. We thought it would be fun to take you guys on a tour of some of the cool projects and fossils that we've been working on during the pandemic. So I'm going to pass the camera over to Salvador, and we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to do fossil prep. All right, so if you want to follow me, when we go out in the field and collect fossils, we encase them in plaster and burlap. So the first step for any fossil, when it gets back to the museum, is it stops here in the prep lab. So we start with our field jacket like this, and we'll use tools like this angle grinder to cut open the fossil and crack it open, just kind of like an Easter egg, and expose the fossil that's inside. Once the fossil is open and the plaster is peeled away from the fossil, we'll then use special tools like air scribes that we have plugged in at different spots around the lab. So if you'll follow me over here, these are one of the special tools we use. It's called an air scribe. They come in all different shapes and sizes. And depending on if you're working on really hard rock or really soft rock or big fossils or little fossils, you'll use a different size tool. So I'm going to turn this on. Oh, maybe I'm not. I'm going to turn this on. And what's cool is it works just like a miniature jackhammer, and it slowly removes the rock from the surface of the fossil without usually causing damage to the fossil itself. All right, follow me back here to our toolbox. So we have a huge toolbox here in the back of the lab that's full of every single thing you could ever want to use when you're working on a fossil. So that includes things like a dental pick, which come in all different shapes and sizes, which you guys are probably familiar with, to things that probably look really familiar to people back at home. Here's Salvador's toothbrush. We also have a lot of teeny tiny brushes for cleaning off really soft, really small fossils, bigger brushes here. And then, of course, all different sizes of rock hammers for when you really need to get in there and crack off some serious rock. All right, so with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Salvador, and he's gonna show you guys some of the really cool fossils that we've been working on in our lab.
Howdy. So if you want to follow me around here, you can take a look at this wall of cabinets. So once we get fossils all cleaned up a little bit and out of their original plaster jackets, we'll usually transition them into a drawer or a cabinet where we can pull them out and work on them later. So we have these cabinets organized by the different field areas where we do field work and where we do research. So all of our prep in this lab is for curator-driven research, and their research interest takes us to a number of different areas all over the globe. So on the far right here, we've got fossils from the Denver Basin in this cabinet, just right in our local area. And then coming a little bit to the left here, we've got fossils from the Fort Union and Hell Creek formations, which are in North Dakota and Montana about 66 million years ago. So if you want to take a peek in here, we've got all sorts of cool goodies, like these partial turtles that we're working on puzzling back together and getting ready for publication and display. It's another cool little turtle for you. If we go down the line, our next cabinet is going to bring us across the world to Madagascar, which is another really awesome area of research that our department is interested in. So you can take a peek in here, and you can see we've got some really, really beautiful dinosaur bones. This is 2 shoulder blades from a tiny little long neck dinosaur that is found down in Madagascar, and another one of its neck bones, I believe. Another big area of field work is down farther southwest in North America. So we have stuff from New Mexico and the San Juan Basin in this cabinet. Coming over here, we have stuff from the Kapirowitz and Wahweap formations of Grand Staircase and Escalante in southern Utah. And some of the cooler fossils I want to show you from those areas don't actually fit in the cabinet. One of them is this really complete turtle skeleton. So this turtle is lying on its back, kind of like this model right here, and all of its belly shell has been removed. So you can see its little paws right here poking out, and cool features like its hips and shoulders and arm bones, and the whole skeleton of this turtle was preserved on the inside, which is really awesome because a lot of times when turtles die in streams, all of their guts get washed out before they could ever be buried or fossilized. Another really cool fossil that I'm excited to be working on right now is a duckbill dinosaur. So here's a cast of what a complete skull looks like. And if you come over here, you can see that this is just a partial skull, and we're starting to get it to emerge from the rock. And I've just been carving away at that with these air scribes that Natalie told you about earlier. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Natalie to tell us a little about glue.
Oh, thank you. So in our lab, we use all different kinds of glue. Some of the glue is permanent and lasts on the fossil forever. Some of the glue we put on just to stabilize the fossil, and we consider those to be something we call consolidants, so it keeps all the pieces together. We use them in just little containers like this, and they come in different thicknesses and concentrations depending on how strong or weak we need the glue to be. Salvador showed you a lot of the really big fossils that we work on in our lab. Lots of turtles, lots of dinosaurs. Some of the fossils we work on aren't so big, and they require us to work underneath of a microscope. So here's a little turtle that I'm working on from Corral Bluffs, which is just about an hour and a half south of Denver here. And we've been working down there for the past few years, collecting fossils that are in these really super duper hard concretions. So all the work that we do removing the matrix from the surface of these teeny tiny guys has to be done underneath the microscope. One of the other really neat fossils that we've been working on in the lab is Pops the Triceratops. So this is a fossil that was collected back in the 1980s from Weld County, Colorado, which is about an hour and a half north of Denver. And it was prepared by a taxidermist. And at the time, when it was prepared, there were still some unique preparation practices that were being used. So Weld County contacted us this past year and said, hey, can you give us an updated fossil, use some of the updated techniques to really make this thing look and feel a little more like fossils that we prepare in museums today. What's really neat about Pops is that when we first looked at the skull, it was just this guy on exhibit. And as we've been working on it, and as we've been preparing the fossils, we've been finding more and more pieces of its skeleton. So over here on the cart, this is a mosaic of the dinosaur's ribs. All of them are incomplete, but we had no idea that any of this was with the fossil at the time when we first caught it. And there's also some really cool parts of the skeleton on this cart over here that we also didn't know about. Like this big chunk of frill that we found just sitting in a box underneath where the main part of the skull was, and also parts of the skeleton. So here's a big piece of the dinosaur's backbone. We also have some parts of the dinosaur's tail here, all articulated together on the cart. And then just some more pieces of frill and limbs. And up in the front window, actually, we have part of the dinosaur's lower jaw, which was a really exciting, really cool surprise. There's some folks visiting the museum. I'll show you one of the last fossils that we have up in the window here. So if you're visiting the museum and you're in the prehistoric journey exhibit, these are things that you can come visit the prep lab and see for yourself. We always have something really cool on display up here at the front window. So this is a dinosaur called Pterosaurolophus. This was described just a few months ago by one of our curators, Dr. Joe Sertich. There's a really cool reconstruction of what it would have looked like. This fossil was collected from New Mexico a few years ago and just got published, what was it, just a few months ago. So brand new exciting science happening up here at the front of the lab. All right, follow me back here. We'll take a look at some more cool things we're working on. Let's see. Oh, so earlier Salvador was talking about that amazing turtle fossil that is all articulated with all the bits and pieces of its skeleton. Well, here are all the pieces of the belly shell that we've taken off and laid out back in the cabinet. One of our amazing volunteers has been working on this for the past few years and has done a really remarkable job. Okay, so these are all fossils that we collect from Utah. So from the Wahweap and Caparis formations, which span from about 82 to 75 million years ago, 74 million years ago. We also do a lot of field work down in New Mexico in the San Juan Basin from rocks that are slightly younger in age, so about 74 to maybe like 72.5 million years old. So in this cabinet, we have really neat fossils. There's a chunk of a rib. We have a piece of a hadrosaur jaw, and some really neat pieces of frill that are still being worked on. These are in the earliest stages of fossil preparation. So just like I was talking about earlier, we have to open up a fossil jacket using an angle grinder. This is a great example of a fossil that's still in its field jacket that has just had the surface peeled back away and is ready for some more prep. Oh, I forgot about this guy too. This guy is from a little underage hadrosaur that we've collected from New Mexico. And this is part of the dinosaur's hip bone. And you can see all these little chunks were all individual pieces that myself and some of the volunteers in the lab have been working on for a number of years, trying to puzzle this guy all back together. So we're still in the process of finding exactly where all these bits and pieces go, which sometimes puzzling can be a little tricky in that way. But it's exciting when you see all the fossils come together and look just like this. All right. Cool. All right, and with that, you guys, we're happy to answer any questions that you have about anything in our preparation lab.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm just popping in like I always do to ask your questions to our presenters today. So if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat and we will get them to Natalie and Salvador. We do have one so far from Emily on Facebook who asks, how can someone get involved or volunteer with the lab or collection? That's a great question.
That's a great question. So you can work with our volunteer office and, you know, I'd be happy to provide you guys with that information or memory. I don't know if you can maybe send them the website or something where they can sign up. But our volunteers in the lab, they go through a pretty rigorous training program so that you know how to care for these things that are millions of years old. And then once you receive the right training, we can get you started on your own fossil projects.
Awesome, awesome. All right, we have a comment from Gwen who says, awesome tour. I completely agree. And like Natalie said, this is the window right in prehistoric journey. So next time you're at the museum, be sure to take a look in. Lots of awesome stuff in there. I actually have a question, just in case we don't get any more. I'm just gonna ask my question. I mean, how many fossils or fossil specimens do you think you have in the lab at any given time? And then how many projects do you typically work on at a time?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think it depends on how you count. When you collect a big animal like a dinosaur, you're going to collect a bunch of those different plaster jackets that Natalie was showing us earlier. Mm-hmm. And usually between the two of us, we'll only be working on 3 or 4 of those at a time, but we have way more than that open. So we have maybe 30 to 50 different projects open in the lab right now. Because usually when there's no pandemic, we have a bunch of volunteers who are coming in and rotating through and working on a bunch of different projects at once.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Okay, and we have some questions coming in from YouTube from Scott, who has 2 questions. The first one is, how do you prioritize what to work on with so many choices? That's a great question.
That's a really good question. So all the fossils that we work on are, we do fossil prep with purpose, right? So we want to prepare things where it's a curator's priority, where they're maybe working on a new publication describing a new type of horned dinosaur or a new turtle. And so those are the things that get moved to the very top of the list. Of course, you know, we collect a whole variety of critters. When you're out in the field, you're not going to leave something just because, you know, somebody might not be interested in it right then and there at that exact moment. But I would say it just comes down to what projects the curators are working on and what priorities they have.
That makes sense. Okay. Scott also asked, what's the oldest fossil you have?
In the lab right now, gosh, I think, let's see, we've been working on some sauropod fossils, so long-necked dinosaur fossils that are collected from the Morrison Formation. And those are about 145 million years old.
And I think we also have a little bit of Ichthyosaur. Let me flip this around.
Yeah.
So this is part of the shoulder girdle of a carnivorous aquatic reptile that is actually from the rock unit just below those long-necked dinosaurs that Natalie was talking about. So this is probably the oldest in the lab right now, just a little bit older than the long-necked dinosaurs in Wyoming.
Okay, we're getting some more questions coming in. Maura asks, can you tell us, can you tell us a little bit about the T-Rex tooth that was recently found in the metro area? That's a great question.
Oh, I'm so excited you asked. Let's go look at it.
So we've got it up in the front window right now.
Front and center.
So you can actually come see it at the museum if you'd like. But it was from the Laramie Formation. So it's a little bit older than T-Rex. It's probably one of T-Rex's cousins. And it's identifiable as a tyrannosaur tooth because it's got these little serrations on both sides, which this animal would use to cut and tear flesh for its consumption.
Oh, wow. And so that is sitting front and center. So if you're at the museum, go by and look at the T-Rex tooth that was just found. Okay, we have some more questions coming in. Aaron asks, when will you allow people from the members only night wander through the prep area again? Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure if you two have any insight into that, but that's over time, we'll be able to do more, and hopefully soon we'll be able to have those awesome member nights where our members could come in and look at projects and talk to our curators and our collection managers and all that great stuff. So hopefully very soon, Aaron. Oh, Kayla asked, how old do you have to be to volunteer in the lab? That's a great question.
You have to be at least 18 to volunteer in the prep lab.
Awesome. Oh, we are getting these questions in. Some more from YouTube. Randy asks, we're a little late joining. Do you have a tool set or toolkit with picks and brushes that you use on a daily basis?
Yep, if you go back a little bit earlier in the video, you'll be able to see Natalie take us through the whole toolbox full of different tools that we use. We run into all sorts of different weird, tricky problems when we're working on fossils, and we keep a bunch of different tools in the lab that we use to solve those issues.
Awesome. Oh, Emily also asks, does the museum share or loan specimens to other museum locations? If so, what is typically loaned out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do. Science across the board is very collaborative. And so our museum is so fortunate that we have such an amazing collection of fossils that we do share them with other colleagues and other researchers around the world. And depending what that is, we may actually send the actual specimen itself to the researcher that's interested, or we may end up making a research quality cast that we can, or a copy of the fossil that we can also share with them.
Oh, and here we're getting some more questions from Jennifer about Pops. Maybe we can show Pops one more time.
Sure thing.
Our special friend in our Paleo lab.
Take a peek at Pops. Is there anything in particular you wanted to know about Pops?
Let's see.
We've got it up here in the front window, and it's one of the oldest Triceratops, which is really cool. And it was discovered just up in Weld County. So this is a local hero.
Awesome. And do you have, I'm just inserting my own questions on here, but do you have like a timeline for when, this will be done, or are timelines hard to make when you're working on fossils? How does that work?
We typically try not to have too stringent of timelines on the fossils we work on.
Mhm.
One saying in fossil prep is that fast prep is bad prep. So we try to take our time and make fossils really beautiful. But since we had a good idea of how much work there was to be done on pops, it's actually pretty much finished for what we can do on it right now. And it's going to be in the window until the Sioux exhibit leaves.
Awesome.
Just a couple weeks. So come see it as soon as you can.
Yes, that sounds great. And Sue will be with us until April 25th. So they are in their final weeks. Oh, and we have another question from Mara who asked, what will happen to Pops when you're done cleaning the fossil? Where will Pops go then?
Great question. So Pops is going to go back on display up in the County Commission building in Weld County, Colorado. And we're also really fortunate to have a cast get made of Pops, which will be happening with one of our collaborators, Rob Gaston. He has an amazing workshop down in Fruita, Colorado. So we'll make a cast copy of Pops, and the original fossil will head back up to Weld County.
Awesome. And how about we let this be our last question, unless we get a few more in from Amy, who asked, do you use drawings or pictures as guides for putting the pieces back together? If so, what type? And I believe when you pulled out one of your fossils, Natalie, you did have some drawings or some sketches or something like that. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I guess a great example of that would be like this little turtle that we're working on right now. This started as just a block of rock. And what's really cool is that there's a turtle in our collection. This is an actual fossil of what we think could be the same type of turtle. So we actually have a real fossil reference to use while we're working on the fossil. And then I do use, this is from a turtle publication that actually shows the different kind of bones to expect and what the specific names of are those bones as we're working on the fossil. So both of those are super duper helpful when we're working on things that we may be unfamiliar with.
And it looks like those are most of our questions. Oh, we have one more from Henry. We'll let this be our last one in reference to Pops. Pops, this is considered Triceratops horridus, correct? I'm not sure.
So we're still, what makes Pops so interesting is that we're still trying to figure out exactly what kind of Triceratops Pops is. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, how about we end on that?
Great.
Is there anything, just as we, lesser Paleo Lab assistants, what advice would you give us as we think about and maybe go out into our own yards and dig up some rocks and fossils of our own? What advice would you give us?
Living in Denver is an awesome location to be a fossil hunter. In the hills around Denver, there's a huge range of different ages of rocks and different types of fossils that are exposed. So if you're a fossil enthusiast in Denver, you're in luck. In fact, the whole city is built on dinosaur-bearing rock. Occasionally, we get things that pop up at construction sites right in the city of Denver. So I would say keep your eyes peeled and stay interested in science, and make sure you get outside and see what you can find.
Yeah, and if you do find something when you're out exploring, please let us know. We love to ID things here at the museum. We get really excited about discoveries literally in people's backyards. So stop by the prep lab, send us an email, get in touch with us if you do find something you think is pretty cool.
Awesome. What a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much for watching. And we'll be right here next week, again, Thursday at 12 for another episode of Science Vision Live. See you then.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.